thing about taxes are they're a necessary evil for people's lives. I'm a writer, was a writer. I wrote novels and I'm published and like that. And for my life, and I just got it again from somebody who'd been an anthropologist, when she called me up to ask something about something, she said, well, I'm creative. I don't have to know that. Well, you don't have to know everything. But what I believe and why I do this and why I'm sort of dedicated to financial literacy, which is really what this is that I think people's lives are better. So I have an agenda. And my agenda is, in the time we have together, is to try not to bore you to death, but to try to introduce you to some of the ideas. Now, if you've never filled out a Schedule C and have no idea what I'm talking about, you're going to leave tonight not knowing how to fill out your tax forms, but you're going to begin to learn the language of doing taxes. And I have a website for you. It's dedicated, it's for artists, and it's free. And if you've never filled out a Schedule C, if you've never filed as an artist, I would recommend reading it from cover to cover. And I know it's not the most exciting of stuff, but it seems to me that most every artist I've ever met believes they want to make art. Otherwise, they'd be doing something else, because making art typically is not the most profitable of things. It's hard these days, but you have a dream, and that's to be an artist. And I understand that dream. I had that dream. Hi. Are you raising your hand to say hello or to ask a question? Okay. I had that dream and I lived it for years. And living that dream is wonderful. You get up in the morning thinking about what you want to do and you do it. And I wish you all the ability to live that dream for as long as you want. But part of living that dream are the necessities or the realities of life, and taxes are part of that. And if you can learn enough to either hire somebody or figure it out yourself, you won't end up, and I don't know if you can see, but I want to show you something, because I got ghosted today by an IRS agent. Now, it's hard to get ghosted by an IRS agent, but he had some operation and he pushed back the appointment, and clearly something happened. So he'll get back in touch with me. I have an audit going on for a terribly long time because of the pandemic, for 2 artists. And they were very flippant always about keeping records and not to worry, we're too small, nobody's going to bother us. Well, they got audited. And I don't know if you can see back here the piles of paper. And this pile of paper, every single page represents something that the agent asked for, and I had to send to him. So while there are very few audits, learning how to do taxes in essence means learning how to be in business. And you are in business as an artist. I don't think for any of you, it's a hobby. I think my guess is, and you know, I'm not sure certainly, but my guess is that many of you went to art school and you want to make a living as an artist or in an art related thing. And most people have no idea how to be in business. So doing taxes is part of learning how to do it. And what we're going to do tonight is show you some basic tax forms and what you have to keep records of. records, receipts, people say, oh, I don't need them. I can always get them. Well, my advice is don't go crazy about it. I don't go crazy about it. I have a file drawer, and into that goes all my receipts for every single thing I buy. And then at the end of the year, I sort them out. In the handout at the very end is a list of basic expenses that you can use to sort your stuff. It's on page 14 of the handout. And you can use that. But doing taxes is like, it's like a still film of the year. What you're doing is you're putting in how much you made as an artist and what your expenses are. And keeping track of that is your job. And how do you do that? Well, you could do it. I'm not sure how many of you know how to use a spreadsheet, but they're not so hard. You can learn to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. That's all you need. You don't even need the multiply and divide. And you can keep a list of all your incomes from your art. And it would be good to keep all the invoices that you send out. Because, why don't we go to the handout? Aretha?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
okay.
Ready.
So,
thank you for sharing that little intro, Susan, because I do think people need to understand that if you don't do your taxes properly, you will be audited. Because I think that that is something important. Nobody wants to do that, end up getting audited.
well, it's not a one-to-one relationship. There are not so many audits on the federal level,
Right.
but on New York State level, they're sending out letters like crazy. Everyone's sending out letters.
Right.
So let's go over tax forms. So if you put up a PDF, the PDF, and we'll start with page 1. Now, you're going to say, Susan, this is 2021 we're dealing with. I'm aware of that. The thing is we don't have finalized forms for everything. So when I do presentations, I use the previous year. Is there some way to put that in vertically?
It's showing vertically for me. What is it? I'm sorry.
It's only showing half a page.
Oh, you want to see the whole page? I see.
Yes.
Okay, so let me zoom out.
Okay, so
Is that the right size?
yeah, that's good enough. Thanks.
Okay.
Tax returns are called 1040s. What a 1040 is actually 2 pages, which is sort of like a table of contents. And the table of contents are where everything feeds into. Now, you know, I'm not going to be political. However, I'm not going to be able to resist certain things. Certain people, shall we say, on the right of the spectrum, wanted to they wanted to destroy taxation for rich people. That's what they wanted to have a flat tax. So poor people and middle class people pay most of the tax. That's what they wanted. But part of that doing that was to, besides to cut funding for the IRS, they changed the way this was done. They wanted a more postcard thing. So over the last few years, they've made this so much more complicated that it's insanely stupid. So what happens is we'll go to Schedule C first, because that's the one you should care about. That's page 6, if you would, Aretha.
6, okay.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
Okay, can everybody see that? Are we okay with that? Now, Schedule C. Schedule C is where you put your business numbers. And if you look at, and I'll just go down it, you put your name, you put what you are, you the accounting method, you're on the cash method. And I don't know how many of you studied Gnostic art in school, but the Gnostics had two things. Everything was either black or white. And in accounting, basically, it's sort of Gnostic categories of cash or accrual. Cash is what you are. Cash is you put it in when you pay it, you put it in when you make it. Accrual is something else, and you're on the cash basis pretty much by law. Now, the next major thing is line 1. It's called income. Now, people rely on their 1099s or their galleries to tell them how much they make. That is a mistake. Sometimes it works out. And I don't know if any of you take credit cards, but if you do, put it in the chat because I'll add in some of the complications with that. But do not rely on the 1099s. You should have, as I said, a Google Doc or an Excel spreadsheet and copies of every invoice you sent and every dollar you received in the year. It doesn't matter when you send out a receipt. It only matters when you get the money in. And if you don't get paid for something on the cash basis, that doesn't count. Do not rely on 1099s. Why? A couple of reasons. One is they may never come, or they may come in August. I do 1099s for clients in September. Are they late? Absolutely. Do they care? No. And so what happens is the IRS and New York State has the capability, particularly the IRS, to match what's on the tax return and what's on the 1099s that they receive. So our artist here, Sarah Artist, put in $35,000. If she has 1099s adding up to $45,000, she's going to get, it's not called, it's just called a notice, in essence. It's not really a full-fledged audit, but she's going to get a letter and a bill. I mean, they might send a nice letter first, but saying, oh, there's a discrepancy here. Oh, and by the way, if you think that the post office is screwed up, it's got nothing on the IRS. They cut the funding so much for the IRS, plus the pandemic, is that there are millions of notices and forms that haven't been processed. They overlaid all these functions onto the IRS that the IRS couldn't handle, still can't handle. And so these robot machines keep churning out letters, and it's very hard to deal with them. So if any of you have IRS problems, you're not alone. Accountants have them. I mean, it's just endless, the issues. So the trick is you should look at every 1099 that comes in to you and match it to what you have records of. Because number one, 1099s can be wrong. I have a client. He was in Eastern Europe that year, and he had somebody minding his papers. And I was emailing him, sending him what I'd gotten and what it said, and we were working together on his taxes. And I said, you didn't tell me about this $130,000 payment from so-and-so.
Ugh.
Well, it was a $13,000 payment. Now, I couldn't hear the man scream. I mean, it was Eastern Europe after all, where he was. But his lawyer immediately contacted the people and said, and they said, oh, and they sent out a corrected 1099. Now, was that on purpose? Why would it be on purpose? Because look, it showed that they paid somebody $130,000. Somebody might have taken that as an expense when the expense should have only been 13. I don't know. Mistakes happen. I'm an accountant. I make them every day. I try to catch them, certainly. So you should really see if your 1099 is for real and if it's accurate. The way to really see what's real is a couple of other methods. You look at your Google spreadsheet, add up what you made during the year. If it comes to 35,000 and your gallery said, we paid you 35,000, home free. The thing you could do as a double check, and I recommend, is to go through all your bank deposits for the year. Why? Because that's what the IRS does. And they will go through every single deposit if and when you're ever audited. And you have to explain why every single one of those dollars is not either on the wage line or one of the unearned income lines or on one of the Schedule C or the earned income lines. And that's part of an audit in most cases these days. So you have to keep track of what you make, and you have to be sure that what goes on the Schedule C is kind of accurate now. Well, I'm not going to get audited. How will they know? I get cash. Well, they probably won't until they do. And then you've put the money in the bank. That's one, and that's so they know. Or you live a certain way. I had a client who didn't become a client because I wouldn't sign his tax return until he put in an amount of money that actually befit his standard of living. He was going, oh, I'm a vegetarian. Vegetables don't cost much. Well, I don't think this guy ever ate a vegetable in his life. I started talking about the price of broccoli, organic broccoli, because he was a healthy vegetarian. And there was no way that he could live on the amount of money he told me he made. Well, it's not my job to go through every receipt and every dollar amount. It is my job, if somebody gives me something that doesn't seem believable, to ask for an explanation. So yes, the audit rate is down. All that's true. And what I would suggest is balance and living the way you want to live. I'm not a risk taker about stuff like this. I put in every penny I make, always have. One year I understated and I filed an amendment on myself because I discovered that I hadn't done it correctly. And what do I get for that? Well, I got higher taxes all my life, that's for sure. And I'm getting more in Social Security than I might have otherwise. But what I got for it was peace of mind. And you're all artists. I think having peace of mind allows you to get up in the morning and make your art. I think financial worries impede making art. Now, it used to be when money was much more flush than it is now. If I asked people, how many people can get up and make rent and make art if they know they owe thousands of dollars to the IRS, there was always some, I don't want to say smart ass, but smart ass who would raise his hand, or a couple of them, and they raised their hands. In the last number of years, nobody has raised their hands because nobody likes getting letters from the IRS or the landlord. And that's why putting your lives into some sort of financial balance where you put aside for taxes. Now, we're talking about Schedule Cs, but really what we're talking about is allocating part of your income to paying taxes. And we'll go on to expenses next, but let's talk about estimated taxes, which are called quarterlies. Quarterlies, or estimated taxes, are how freelancers pay as you earn during the course of the year. It's not a voluntary system because there are penalties if you don't, in many cases. But what this does is helps you not live in tax hell. Now, for me, tax hell is when I was seeing people before the pandemic, and I don't care what color you are. I just don't care whether you're Black, you're white, you're Asian. I don't care. If I tell you that you owe $10,000 or $15,000 and you have 1,000 in the bank, your skin's going to turn an odd shade of gray. And it's the look like, I'm in a stranger's place. How far am I from the bathroom? Because I think I may have to vomit. And the trick here is not to have people vomit in my office. No, so far nobody has, and hopefully they never will. Why do I go out speaking like this? I do it at this stage of my life. I've been doing it for years because I so believe in financial literacy, that everyone should have a basic understanding of what their finances are, of how to do taxes. And you're not going to get it from the IRS. And I did a radio show about a much broader subject. I did a holistic financial show for many, many years on BAI. And I know that people are scared witless about this. And so I've been working my whole life to make people less scared and more proactive to learn a little bit, because it does take a period of time to learn this. I don't know about you, but I played the piano for 2 years as a kid, and I had to stop because I played by the numbers, which are finger holds. I never learned to read the notes, but I did play the trumpet for much longer. And you can't suddenly play Mozart just looking at a form, looking at a page. You have to learn the notes. You have to learn the holds. You have to learn how it's supposed to sound. You have to develop an ear. Well, doing taxes is not playing Mozart, but it is learning something. Many of you have learned a foreign language. I'm a language moron. Oh, I'm not sure I'm not supposed to use that phrase anymore. Take back the word moron. I am language challenged. I lived in France. I had a French lover for 10 years. My dog and I, we slept across the ocean. I lived there half the year. My lover came here in the summers because being a professor, there was a summer off. And I could never do the subjunctive or the conditional. I couldn't do it. I lived in the simple present, simple past, and simple future. I felt quite simple in French, as a matter of fact. Stupid might be the correct phrase. And when you start anything, there are those of you who are going to feel like I felt putting together the Loom cube that I got when I was started doing Zoom stuff. It looked so easy. And then I started putting it together. Well, eventually it got together and eventually it kind of works. So this is a process. Will you learn it in 1 year? Probably not. You become more and more familiar with things. So, but let me just say, do not take tax advice from the UPS delivery person. They're not the best tax advisors, although they seem to like to give tax advice. Just because somebody says it on the internet, go to the IRS website to make sure that's what they're saying. People say all sorts of things about taxes, and that falls under the rubric of people say all sorts of things. So anyway, let's move on. So does anyone have any questions so far that we've been covering income? No.
No, I don't see any, nothing.
Okay, so let's go on to expenses. As you can see from lines 8 through 27 are for expenses, and then if the carryover expenses are put on page 2, but let's go through some typical expenses. So Sarah,
Susan, sorry to interrupt you. Do you want me to make it a little bit larger, this part? Because I'm noticing, because I'm looking at people, that they may be on smaller screens. So I'll zoom in just for this section so they can see where you're talking.
that's a good idea. Zoom in. Let's do where I put numbers.
Right.
Go down if you can.
Yeah.
Because you can.
There, expenses is.
Yeah. Let's start there.
Okay.
Can everyone see? If you can't see, put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah lives in Brooklyn. She spends $978 on art supplies. Now, again, there are two kinds of expenses. The kind that theoretically you use up fairly quickly, and the kind that lasts for much longer. And I'm not going to go into depreciation for, which is usually the kind you do for much longer, because the IRS has made it possible if you make an election that you can deduct up till $2,500 of the longer things. In other words, a computer theoretically should be deducted over 5 years, a table over 7. And there's an election that you can make that's on page 12 of the handout. Will these people be able to download the handout?
We can email it to them separately, just so they have it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Because on page 12 is the de minimis safe harbor election you make, so that you can put anything under $2,500 on here without doing a scheduled, without doing separate forms for depreciation. All right, so then we've got travel. Well, there's not so much during the pandemic, God knows. So what's travel? Travel is one of the more complicated ones because it depends on the facts and circumstances of your existence. And when somebody like me says facts and circumstances, no, the answer is going to be long and have different bullet points. You would think, if you think of a normal business person before the pandemic, they were at their office. And if they had to go to a client, they would take a taxi, take a subway, they'd go to the client, they'd come back. that's fine for local transportation. However, most artists don't have an office, a typical office where they go every day. Some people are lucky enough to have a studio. Other people work out of their homes. And if you have a studio, you have to literally go to the studio, go from the studio to where you're going, and then come back. That you can take for local transportation. Going to your studio, going to any office doesn't count. Why? Because that's called commuting, and that's not allowed for anybody. So the problem comes when somebody can't qualify for home office. Home office is, I don't know if we, well, home office is if there is an exclusive space in your house, and I mean exclusive, it's not used for anything else. It's not your kitchen table. It's not, it doesn't have in it the walkway from your couch to your bedroom. It's an exclusive space. You can take a deduction for that. And that's on line 30. And that carries over from a form called an 8829, which I hope is in the packet.
I can scroll. Is it?
It's on page 11.
Okay, let me go there. Sorry. There we are.
Okay, so Sarah has an apartment that has 600 square feet. 100 of it is used for her business, and that's lines 1 and 2. So she's able to deduct, and she's a renter, she's able to deduct 16.67% of her rent, her utilities. I wouldn't put phone on here. I put phone on Schedule C, but her gas and electric. So what that number comes to, if you go down to line 36 on this form, is 1469. And if we go back to Schedule C, which is page 6, you'll see that 1469. Now, the problem with this is that most of you will not have, well, I can't speak for most of you, I have no idea. Typically, for those people who are not making their living as an artist, they're doing something else. Like, I don't know how Aretha makes a living, frankly. I didn't ask her, but she's selling real estate. I did taxes. Some years I made money as a writer, some years I didn't. But in the years you don't show a profit, and the profit will be on line 29, in the years you don't show a profit, you cannot take any home office. And there's also a simplified method for home office where you can take a small amount without going through all of that. But the real issue is, did you make a profit? And is the space exclusive? Typically in New York, unless you really have a large space, a lot of people now are making art in their studios. I mean, they're one-room studios, and they're doing it on their computer, or they're doing it in a space where they're living, and typically they can't really take home office. So what happens if you can't take home office? Well, you lose the deduction, but back to that travel thing, it would be an argument with the agent as to whether or not you can actually take the deduction for going to Blix and getting some office and artist supplies. And if you think I'm making this up, this is what I've been dealing with my whole career. These are the rules. So will agents let you have something? Depends on the agent. So let's talk about the IRS for a minute. I never met an IRS agent who, when they were a child, dreamed of being an IRS agent. They just didn't. For some, it meant a steady job and a steady paycheck and some dignity. I actually met somebody who had been an artist who became an IRS agent because she wanted the money. She wanted a job and benefits and a retirement plan. So you never know. So if you ever have the need to speak to an IRS agent or the somebody at New York State or New York City, I'm going to say something that some of you are going to say. Don't be sanctimonious. Don't be punctilious. I wouldn't disrespect an IRS agent. Well, you might not, but I'll give you a clue. People don't stop being racists at the IRS office. People don't stop being sexists when they go in and they deal with a woman IRS agent. Don't be condescending. Don't be disrespectful. Don't try to jolly them up. Don't offer them anything. They're not allowed to take it. They're not allowed to take a cup of coffee. Most of all, treat them with the respect that you want to be treated with. Some of them don't have the greatest language skills because they're first generation. My fear has always been that something awful would happen here and I'd have to go to a country where I didn't speak the language. Because for me, I would fail. There would be no way I would be working at the equivalent of the IRS agent, Internal Revenue Service, because I could never learn the language that well. And if you think I'm kidding, not if you ever have to meet one, but if you ever meet one socially, ask them some of the stories of how people have treated them. Artists in particular, because I care about artists and I don't want artists hurt. Sometimes are so nervous or so condescending that they can put somebody off very easily. The fact of the matter is I remember an audit with a guy. My client is a sculptor who's a professor in town, or was, and my client's last job was working in a shoe store. He was a salesman, and he took the test to be an IRS agent. He was so excited. I feel like I'm making this story up, but I'm not. I remember it. He was so excited to have something to go home and tell his people about, because in those days, I schlepped all the books with the pictures and the reviews. Now you don't have to do that, because before you walk in, they're going to have been on Google and looked at the reviews to see if you're actually an artist and what your position in the art world is. The guy said to me, "Do you mind if I go copy this? I want to have something to show my family." This guy had such respect for somebody who could do this. So you never know what you're going to hit. But I do know that there was an IRS agent. My client turned out to have been hiding money, and I went off that case as soon as I understood what was going on. But the agent told me that she went home in two ways. She was Black, and she went home two ways every day from the IRS. Numb or with a migraine headache. And she's telling me that all these white male accountants would say to her as they handed her a receipt, "Smile, honey." Now, you don't tell the IRS agent to smile. They're the judge and the jury. Don't do it. Treat them with the same amount of respect that you want to be treated with. And if they don't treat you with the same kind of respect that you want to be treated with, you can stop any kind of interchange you want at any point and ask to speak to their supervisor. There is, I mean, I've never encountered disrespect, frankly, you know, for whatever reasons, but I'm sure people would, and I'm sure people do. So if you encounter it, you have some rights here too.
Susan,
Anyway.
let me interrupt for a second. I just want to see if anybody has any questions about anything that you've shared so far. I did think it was helpful when you talked about the different spaces. I have a studio, just to, because you did mention you didn't know something about what I do, but I actually have a separate studio, which shamefully I spend not enough time in, but I do pay rent on it. And I have for a few years. So I hope that, you know.
Line 20.
I'll go back to that. I wanted you to be able to see people's faces, so I took the PDF down. But does anyone have any questions for Susan so far? You can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask. She shared about expenses. She also shared about travel, and she also talked about deducting your space. Does anyone have a hand up? Nope, I don't see any hands up. Okay, no. I guess we're good. So do you want me to pull that up again?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the other big areas are meals and entertainment. Well, there's no more entertainment. What do I do?
No more entertainment.
No more entertainment. What do I do for people? The next page is I didn't take anything for her. For artists who go, most artists don't pay for museums, but I think to be an artist, you have to go to lots of cultural events. I think, and I don't have court cases on this, but I've never lost it at an audit. I think you have to have access to every cultural thing you could possibly dream of, whether it's the opera, whether it's dance, whether it's theater, whether it's Netflix, I don't care. I call, well, for streaming services, you can put in streaming services or something. I call it cultural events. And I think you should have the right to go to them and take it as part of your art career. As an artist, you have to be au courant about whatever's going on in the arts. How are you supposed to learn anything? How are you supposed to absorb what's going on around you unless you know what's going on around you? So for travel, Aretha's at her studio. She goes, sees a play. The transportation from her studio to the play and back, that's deductible. Now, what happens if you know a curator? Okay, you want the curator to put you in a show. That's what you want. And you say to the curator, let's have a drink. And you know the curator doesn't have any money either. So you take the curator out and you say, let me invite you. I'm flush this week, or dinner, or whatever it is. You can take that expense as a meal. You eventually only get 50% of it. So line 24B of 181 represents 362 of actual meals. But what do you have to prove that you had a meal? You have to have notes in a calendar or put separately. Under $75, you don't need a receipt, but receipts are much more impressive. Who you were with, the date, the name of the restaurant or bar, the purpose, and the cost. And those are deductible. Now, what if you and a friend go out to dinner every other week and you say you're both artists and that should be deductible? I cannot tell you how many times people have tried that, or you split the bills. Not going to work. Once maybe you take a friend out because you're thinking of doing a show together, you're thinking of working in tandem, one's making a film, one's doing this, one's doing that. But if the agency's a pattern in that, not going to happen. Now, let's talk about travel. Were it so, right? It's the pandemic. In my lifetime, I've been referred to by Authors Guild and various other groups. And very often accountants used to call me up, and these people would want to take their trips to Provence or to Florence. For some reason, Florence, Vienna, Venice, and Provence were the big ones. My client wants to write a cookbook. They just spent 3 weeks in Provence. They're going to write a cookbook, a Provençal cookbook. So what does your client do? Some kind of corporate executive. Fat chance. Or skinny chance. You all have a different situation. It used to be, and this is a long time ago, it used to be that you could get away with going to the Barbizon Forest outside of Paris, or to Fontainebleau, or one of those places, to the Bois de Fontainebleau, or down to see where various painters painted, or you went to a museum in the south of France, or to the Louvre. And you spent a month in France, just sightseeing. People used to take that and say, I was doing research. Well, and I don't have a court case on this, but I wouldn't do that. What I would do is try to, and also getting a job as a professor, by the way, and I know this may sound, is a track into getting a job, although being an adjunct is not necessarily the best permanent way to live. But if you could get a job teaching in France, then, and you get paid on a 1099, then you get to deduct the travel to France and expenses while you're in France. Another thing to do, and this sounds easier than, it's harder than it sounds, is to try to get a show in France so that you have to be there for a month, because the gallery expects you to meet collectors. If you're just beginning, you could make the argument that you went to France and you make a list of every single person you socialized with. You showed your work to galleries. Now, I know that you can't walk into a gallery and get show your, however you're showing your stuff now. The IRS agent might also know it too. So you might have a friend who shows in France and ask to be introduced into that gallery and say that you're coming and you'd like to show your work, or do something where you have to be there.
I have a question. Susan. Sorry, because I'm thinking about this. So my studio is at Mana in Jersey City, and one of the things that they offer, they do offer lots of residencies that we can apply for. So, you know, like every couple months, it seems like there's something that I could apply for where I could go for a month or 2 or 6 or something. Can you deduct that? Because you are really there for the sole purpose of focusing on creating your art while you're there. And then also, so that's part one. And then part two of the question
one
is,
at a time. Aretha, that's a really good question.
right.
And I hate that when people say, oh, that's a good question.
That's
anyway, it's complicated because I don't think the IRS would permit it per se.
Oh, okay.
Because all you're doing is, from their point of view, you could make your art in your studio. However, what I do, and so far it hasn't been audited, so I don't know if it would stand up, and I've been doing this for years, is I think if you go to McDowell, I mean, all I have to do is hear. I turned down going to those places when I was young because I wanted to stay home and write. I didn't want to hurt my mind. Anyway, be that as it may, I believe these are networking opportunities.
Okay.
So I call them networking.
Right.
And I put them in as a networking expense.
And how do you qualify a show? Because what if,
how do I qualify a show or a good show?
Well, a show, because I would say if I just decided to commandeer a sidewalk in Florence and just lay my artwork out every day for a week, that's a show, right? Like how
I have never had anyone tell me they did that.
Well, see, here's the thing. I do a lot of performance art, so I make up the rules as I go. I'm like your biggest tax nightmare. You don't want me as a client because I come up with all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, but that's an interesting one. Let's take that one. When somebody like me says, I don't know, it could mean that I'm an idiot. That's very possible. But I do try to read every court case in this area that I can. And what typically happens is this kind of thing doesn't get to court because it's expensive to go to court.
Right.
What I think is if you go chalk a piece of art on a sidewalk in Florence and take a picture of it and go spend a month there having a good time, and in an audit you show the picture, the agent is going to look at you. They are not supposed to roll their eyes. But I don't see that holding up. But if you get some press and you have a gallery somewhere that might pick up something from it, I think you have a better chance of prevailing.
Right. Okay.
I don't think by itself it's enough.
Right.
And I probably wouldn't encourage you to take it as a deduction. But if you, okay, my particular passion is Bruegel, Peter Bruegel, the senior, and his drawings. I love his paintings, I love his drawings. I've been to most every printing cabinet, that major collection of Bruegels in Europe. Now, if I were an artist who, it used to be that if I were an artist who was trying to copy Bruegel, I would probably get away with being able to go to every printing cabinet and learning about his art. Now they're going to say it's all available on the internet. So what you got to do is find stuff that's not digitized and make that part of your art. Make that part of your research, I believe. For instance, in Paris, there used to be these city museums that weren't digitized. They had all the police records and all kinds of stuff like that. If I were wanting to do something involving Paris, I would make sure that I spent days in these places that weren't digitized so that the agent couldn't say to me, oh my God, it's right here. You didn't have to go to Paris for that.
Right.
And I'm not kidding about that. You know, like you would think that standing in front of, I went to the Bruegel retrospective in Vienna. You would think that seeing the most beautiful art ever would count. It doesn't. It's in a book. You can look at the book.
Right. Right.
Did you have another question?
Oh, no, that was it. Oh, well, I think we talked. No, I think you answered that. Oh, I was going to mention going to Art Basel also. And as an artist, if that's write-offable. Like I want to.
Oh, I think going to Art Basel is just fine.
We can write that up.
Would you go to Art Basel?
Question.
Were you in Art Basel?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Were you in Art Basel?
I have been there, but my art has not been featured there yet.
Why did you go to Art Basel? What did you accomplish by going to Art Basel?
Well, I didn't write it off, but I just kind of went.
No, but I'm trying to make it into a deduction.
Oh, okay. So if I were to be going in December, I would be going to try to find and create relationships with gallerists to try to have future shows. That would be the goal of going.
Okay, if it were me, that's the kind of thing I would write ahead of time, if possible, to have some sort of email exchange before or after. I mean, you could try it after. And if you succeeded, that would bolster having the reason. I mean, you could try to take it anyway and keep a log of every single person you spoke to.
Right.
And showing them your whatevers. If you had some evidence, it might work, it might not. I can't tell you that it's a definite. I think it's one of the things where it would depend on the agent.
Right. Okay, I hope my questions didn't throw you off. I just.
No, that's what questions are. I want to give considered answers to them.
Let's see if anyone else has. Oh, sorry. I'm just checking. There were a couple people that joined while we were speaking, and I'm just wondering, does anyone have any questions?
Because the thing is, look, I know, but I'm not sure the IRS knows, that making connections in the art world is the key to getting into a gallery, getting publicity, getting whatever it is to be able to make a living.
Oh, we have a question.
We have a question.
I've got to find it though now. Oh, there we go. Janessa is asking, do you have to be an LLC to do the business deductions?
Absolutely not. Thank you, Janessa. That opens up the issue of an LLC is different from a corporation. That's number one. An LLC is a limited liability company. It comes out of Spain in the medieval times or something. It is simply for one person. It is simply a disregarded entity that provides liability protection of some sort. I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak about liability, although I can as a certified financial planner. You file the same tax return plus an information return to New York State. No, this return says profit or loss from business, sole proprietorship. Poof, you are in business as a sole proprietor. You can take all deductions, everything. People, I just got an email from somebody who is just starting out, who said, I just incorporated. I'm just starting out. Well, as I said, being an LLC and being a corporation, not the same thing. Corporation is a whole other entity. You have to keep really good records for it. You have to have, I believe, a reconciled bank account. And I think you should use QuickBooks. I think everybody should use some version of QuickBooks anyway. And it used to be that, well, years ago when Soho was Soho and it was for artists instead of brands, there used to be a bar, which is still there, but it was run by Mike Finelli, who had dyed black hair. And it used to be that really only men went in by themselves, women went in when accompanied by a man. That's the way the art world used to be. And I hear tell that there used to be an attorney who got his business from the bar at Finelli's. He would turn to some guy at 5 PM who had just wandered in from his studio, and he'd say to the guy, "So, you incorporated?" The guy would say, "No, should I be?" And then attorney would say, "Oh, yeah." And the attorney could pay his rent for the month off the fees he would get to incorporate the guy. But it used to be that what people did, and they still do it, is get some advantages. One of them being that you didn't have to pay as much Social Security as you do when you're filing as a sole proprietor. Of course, when you get older, I have a friend who deliberately understated, who was incorporated, who deliberately understated her income for years and years on her wages. I mean, she put in her correct income, but took the rest not subject to self-employment tax. And she thought she was so smart. But now that she's retired, she's getting half, if not less than half, of what somebody who's put in the full amount would get. But that's what people did to save money. And it also used to be that you could take pension deductions. Well, now you can take them anyway as a sole proprietor. So are there advantages to being a sub S corporation? Yeah, you could save some money if you're making a lot of money. Yeah, but since there's something called qualified business deductions, which is on 1040 line, where is it? Line 13 on page 1 of 1040, you now can take 20% of your net profit, subject to one other thing.
I think I'm on the wrong page. I'm sorry. It's not the profit loss.
No, page 1.
Okay, let me go back then.
Line 13 on page 1. There's a 20% deduction for sole proprietors. And see line 13,
Yes.
where it says 2,400.
Correct.
That was Sarah Artist's QBI deduction. And that really has leveled the playing field of all those people who thought they were so smart. And there are limits on this, but we don't have to go into the limits. I don't believe that having an LLC is fine, but I don't believe that a beginning artist, unless they have issues of liability, and even if they do have issues of liability, I'm a certified financial planner. I can't sell you insurance at this point because I gave up my license. I didn't have it for property. I didn't have it for that. I believe that those of you, say sculptors, say photographers, say filmmakers, I believe all of you should carry insurance that would cover you if anyone had something fall on them, or if they tripped over a cord from your camera, if you still have cords, you used to have cords, or for that matter, if they did anything in your studio, you have to have insurance because you can get sued. And people tell you all the time that a corporation protects you. Well, and an LLC protects you. Well, most people don't do the LLC correctly. They commingle their funds, so that nullifies the LLC in the first place.
Right.
And there's something
Can you
called
say that part
piercing.
again? I think that's important, Susan. You said the commingling of funds.
Most people, they have their LLCs and their corporations, and they spend money out of their personal accounts and they put them into their business accounts, and they spend personal money out of their business accounts for personal. They do all kinds of things. They don't keep things totally separate like you're supposed to. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I think I would rather have insurance than to rely on some sort of corporation to protect me. From if my sculpture fell on somebody.
Right.
And you know, these things happen. I can think of somebody, one of my clients in one of these fields, who had something happen, and you get sued. And even if you have a corporation, or even if the LLC holds, which I can't speak to really, you still have lawyers' fees. And the lawyers' fees very often are the largest component. So you need insurance. So being a corporation, I don't think is tremendously advantageous for an artist at this point, especially a beginning artist. Grants.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful to know. Yes.
The thing is, are grants taxable? Answer, yes. Now, it used to be that what you could do is you'd get your grant, and at the time, NYFA was giving out $3,600 grants. And you could say, I have $3,600 of expenses. And you could put in one, subtract the other on a line, and you didn't have to enter any tax. Well, those days are gone. Technically, you're supposed to put in the grant as a wage. But if you do that, then you can't take any expenses off that particular grant. I believe that if you're in the business of making art, I believe, and I don't have a court case for this, but I still believe it, and I've done this, is that if you get a Guggenheim or a grant to make a project or something, a public art piece, certainly a public art piece, that you should put that on the Schedule C. What that does sometimes is gives you a profit. And we have a couple more minutes. I want to talk about hobby loss. If you get a grant and you put it on Schedule C, you might end up paying some more self-employment tax as opposed to income tax, because those are two different things. Self-employment tax very often is the largest tax that you pay, and that covers Social Security and Medicare, and it's for when you're old or disabled. But what the thing about hobbies? See, I want to see your faces. I want to know if you've been taking losses or if you've been making profits, but I can't ask that either because that's too personal. I suspect that a number of you have taken losses over the years, or some of you. Now, most artists take losses. Most artists don't make money. Now, what's the IRS rules about that? And there's a thing on my website about hobby loss.
Well, you said earlier you can't take deductions if you don't make any money.
You can take deductions up to the point of zero profit. And that gets complicated because if they say you're a hobby, you can't even do that anymore.
Right.
But you have to put in the income. Anyway, but most people don't get to that point. I believe Ronald Reagan's first wife was named Jane Wyman, and she had a hit song called I Believe. You don't want me to sing it, but I believe. I believe that every one of you intends to make a profit. Van Gogh didn't make a profit. His brother didn't even make a profit. But a lot of people are making profits off Van Gogh now. The IRS says you have to make a profit in 3 out of 5 years. I say that's nonsense. There was a case, a very old case named Gloria Churchman versus the US. And in Churchman versus the US, Churchman was married to a wealthy something or other. So the wealthy something or other underwrote her sculptures. Now her sculptures were in museums. She did well, but she always spent more. And the IRS ruled on her behalf. There was a more recent case, which still isn't really completed because the tax court judge left it open to saying whether the expenses were ordinary and necessary. That was Creel versus the United States, I believe, Susan Creel. And she was unknown. I mean, I knew who she was. That doesn't make her well known. It just meant that I've been around Soho since forever. And I looked at a lot of art and I knew who she was, thought she was a good artist. She took such large expenses and tax court ruled it was okay. So, and she's been doing it since forever. Does that mean that everybody can do that? No. What it means is, I believe again, that if you're serious, if you have, artists have resumes unlike anyone else. I mean, God bless you. If you have a resume, I don't care what show you're in, where it is, you write that on your resume. You put together every single thing showing you're serious and keep every single email or anything that shows that you tried to enter a show. Because what that shows is you're trying to be in the business of making art. Every email where you have tried to contact somebody to introduce yourself or whatever it is, it means you're in the business of being an artist. And of course, selling stuff, I believe that putting a 0 on the tax return is an invitation to an audit, which means it just ups your chance for an audit. It doesn't mean you're going to get audited. Oh. So I would suspect it would be good if you could sell something to somebody every year, you know, and it doesn't have to be a lot, a couple $100 or something, but that's what I believe. And one year, over a couple of years, a long time ago, I put in 2 zeros. One, because on a Schedule C, the woman insisted on it. And on another kind of form, the woman insisted on it. And I said, please don't, to each of them. And they said, oh, yes, yes, yes. And they both got audited. That's where my belief comes from, but just that. But I believe that you can take losses. You just might not be able to take home office in those cases, but I believe you can take losses for as long as you're serious about it. Let me talk about something that is going to sound self-serving, all right? Mm. Let's talk about finding an accountant or a tax preparer. Let's talk about TurboTax, well, not TurboTax, but let's talk about the self-preparation, tax preparation. The reality of this is that people like me cost money. And the reality also is that some of you don't have any. And that's a real problem. And that's why I do my website, because that's how I can give what I can give to you. And doing taxes is a matter of stomach. I alluded to it before by saying I like to sleep at night. So I put in every penny that I make. It's a matter of who you are. If you find somebody who's very inexpensive and they don't get back to you, that's how they're going to be with you. because they're doing a volume business. And that's the kind of treatment you should expect from this kind of person. It's a real problem when you don't have a lot of money about how you're going to be treated. And I don't know a solution for this. I've never known a solution for this except to do my website, which has always been free. But I do know that if you try to do TurboTax or one of those things, you've got to be careful, and you have to remember that these forms are serious. I've known people that have just made up numbers and put them in thinking nothing's going to happen. And very often nothing does happen, but sometimes it does happen. So you have to decide who you are. And I'm not making a value judgment. Don't misunderstand me. I say it goes by your stomach. If I believe, and I believe this in my heart, I believe that if you do, I don't want to say the right thing in this kind of world, given what's going on in this world, but, and I'm not religious, and I don't want to say render unto Caesar, although some days I feel like we're going towards a world with Caesar. But I do think that life is better if you have the money to pay your rent and your taxes, and you don't have to worry about having lied, cheated, and stolen. So in other words, if you find somebody to do your taxes and say, don't worry, honey, the word honey, walk out right then, I believe. Nobody should. Honey, sweetheart. But that's me. Those are my politics. Condescension is just not. Don't worry about it. I'll estimate how much you made. And that's what some people do. Me, Susan, I'd run from that person. Because if you get an audit notice, there's no way you can back anything up. So what I presented tonight and hoped was okay was a way to begin to learn about how to do it in a way that will allow you to make your art. And I wish all of you a thriving career where you can make something. There's nothing like writing something, making something where you go, I don't want to swear, I don't know any of you, and this is recorded, where you go, oh my God, I did that. And of course, Thomas Mann says, if you think that, erase it and start over, do something else. But be that as it may, but making art can be so, you know, the notion of flow, and I can't pronounce his name. He was 93, he just died, the Czech who came up with the notion of flow. When you're in flow, making your art, well, I wish that to you. I wish you a lifetime of doing that. But I do think keeping taxes in mind and doing this kind of stuff allows you to have that flow.